Doesn't matter who you are, what you know. The truth is, the less you know, the less you do, the less you try, the better. I remember I moved to a new church building, and I was trying to kind of get my foot in the door and connect with all these people. It was like a young single adult church. Um, and I was just trying to build connections with as many people as I could. And the more I pushed, the more resistance I got. And I kept wondering, like, why does nobody want to connect to me? Why does nobody want to talk to me? And I felt very lonely. I felt, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but I felt like I was pretty popular in high school. Like I had a lot of people who knew me and were friends with me and wanted to talk to me and wanted to get to know me. Maybe it wasn't always the best kind of attention. It was a lot of negative people, a lot of, some kind of not the best people in the world. But I was able to attract just about anybody from many different grades and so on and so forth, right? But suddenly I'm in this new church building and I can't seem to get my foot in the door. I can't seem to connect with anybody. And I'm wondering to myself, like, what's wrong? I stopped wanting to go to church for a little bit. I didn't want to go to church. And sometimes I just like sit in the parking lot. And I wouldn't go inside. And I understood that it wasn't like, like sometimes when you're in a situation like this, you want to blame everybody else. But I understood that this was me. This was a me problem. I just didn't know what it was. I couldn't really tap into what it was. I'm like, how on earth have I been able to make so many friends in my life? And now suddenly, like, I'm in this situation and I can't connect to a single soul. But I am so grateful for that because somewhere amidst that timeline, I had a realization. I think I saw the world from a different perspective. And I really do believe that God needed me to be this way. He needed me to, like, be humble enough to recognize that I wasn't the only person feeling this way. I started seeing other people who sat alone at church and some of them were kind of more nerdy, some of them were a little bit weirder. I'm not trying to like knock on them or anything like that, but I started recognizing this, and it took a lot of humility to be like, hey, if no one else is going to talk to me, I know for a fact if I went to them, they would be my friends. you know like I would have someone to sit by at church. And so I started sitting next to these kind of these outcasts. And I started to see a lot of things change in my life. And I started to have some realizations, and I started to make some connections mentally that I had never made ever in my entire life before. I realized that these people wanted friends. They wanted these connections. They were hungry for it just like I was hungry for it. And by me just doing this, being a well-presented person, dressing well every single Sunday, doing my hair, looking the best I can. When you're pushing and pushing and pushing, you come off as a sales guy with this kind of appearance. But when you stop paying attention to everybody else and you start focusing on like these outcasts, people start recognizing, they start noticing. And these people became very dependent on me. It's like they started asking to sit next to me on Sundays, or when we had like classes, where we could talk about the doctrines or whatever, talk about the scriptures. They wanted to sit next to me. And I was no longer alone, and I didn't recognize when that separation happened. It just happened so naturally. And I started getting called to positions of leadership. And I had all these opportunities to serve, and I had these opportunities to reach out. And there was one thing where I'd kind of manage the communion. I'd set things up. At least that's how it works in my church. I was the guy to set up the communion, and I was able to go in, and part of my role was to go into the audience and the congregation before, find a bunch of willing young men, and ask if they would help pass out the communion. And I started to delegate this authority and started to connect with people and get to know people better. And by doing so and serving with my other brothers, these other people, you wouldn't consider them to be brothers But when you humble yourself and you bring yourself to a different level and you stop seeing yourself higher than everybody else, because for some reason we feel like we have to have this pride about us to make everyone want us. No. People want to be wanted. They don't want anybody who wants themselves more than you. We all found purpose together. We all started connecting. We all started to build up. And these guys started making friends with these outcasts. And I realized that's the trick. That is the trick. You ever wonder how some of these people, completely unassuming people, build these cult followings online? Cult's like a weird buzzword. I don't like using that, but have you ever wondered how they do that? It's by giving other men purpose, by bringing them to a level that is greater than they've ever felt. By making other people feel special, something activates this power that was already in them. And they start doing more than anybody else has ever seen them do. They suddenly become social. They suddenly become so outgoing almost instantly. And the thing is, I should have known this. All right, I should have known this because years ago, I was placed in another situation where I felt like an outcast. Literally at the beginning of my mission, I went and I served a mission, right? At the beginning of my mission, I got there. I knew nobody. And suddenly my high school status, which I held to be really high, was gone. Where nobody knew me, I was in a new position, and honestly, I learned later that some of the guys thought I was like actually on the spectrum because I was trying so hard. I was trying so hard, but I was so socially down. I don't know how to explain what even happened to me in that process. It was just so humbling. It was so humbling to be where I felt like I was on the top and then suddenly at the very bottom around these other guys who were definitely way more physically fit, physically appealing in a lot of ways compared to me. So I was just at the bottom suddenly, and it killed me. And I was like that for the first couple months of me serving this mission. But the second, no one could have ever seen anything out of me. I didn't see anything in me at this point. I just kind of felt like I was actually at the bottom. But out of nowhere, the mission president, the guy on basically the head of the mission, he can call people to different leadership positions, and I'm still in training. You usually have 12 weeks of training, and then you're out, and you can, you get a lot of opportunities. But never this ever happened. I guess it happened once, 3 years before me. But by the last 6 weeks of my training, I get a call, and they're like, "Hey, Brother Bowman, could you be what they call a district leader, which means you manage over a team of I can't remember how many people. I think it's around 12 people or something like that. I can't remember." And I'm like, "Really?" And obviously you have the choice. And I said yes. I don't know why I said yes, because I felt I had no confidence. And the missionary that was with me, what they call a companion, he was shocked that I'd gotten this call. But I'll tell you, it's not about me getting this leadership position. It was I literally was the bottom. People literally thought I was on the spectrum. Not to hate on anybody, right? But people literally thought I was on the spectrum, and overnight I was a different person. I was super outgoing. I was super loving. And I found that by giving someone authority, by helping someone feel bigger than themselves, they become greater than they've ever been. I saw what God saw in me there. And I assume that when I was out there and I was helping out with the communion and I was calling people up and delegating some of that authority, that they felt exactly that same thing, exactly what God knows they can be. And I think that's the calling that all men have forgotten. It's nowadays it's about looks maxing. It's about become an entrepreneur, get rich or die trying, right? But we forget what God wants us to be. It's always about what we want for ourselves and what the world sees as valuable. But what does God see in us? And I think that's what men really hunger for, is they're trying to find out. Who does my Father in heaven know me to be? Who does he know me as? Because I don't know myself. I'm here on this earth and I'm doing everything on my own, and I'm trying to figure out how I can possibly make friends, how I could possibly be successful in any feat of life. I feel so alone. But if we could just get a glimpse, if we could just get a glimpse into what God sees in us, everything could change. One more example before I close this video off, and I really do feel that this is a powerful example. Even though I felt like I had a lot of friends, even though I felt like I was pretty popular in high school, there was one place I did not feel very popular at all. It was actually a seminary class. And if you live in Utah, you have a seminary class that you have the option of signing up for during school time. And you basically just cross the street to a church. There's a million churches in Utah. And you cross the street and you can join the seminary class. And I did not feel welcome in there because I don't know if it was a self-perception thing, but I was quite the troublemaker, and I was very addicted to a couple of substances, and I think in a lot of ways I just didn't feel like I don't know. Whenever you are in the act of sin, you will never feel welcome in a place that is holy. And it's not because people are judging you. No one ever judged me there. No one knew anything about me. Okay, but I knew about me. And that guilt alone made me feel lesser than. And while I was there, there's this one guy. His name was Joe. His Joe Pinnock was his name. I'll name drop it because this is a really positive thing. This guy actually changed my life, and because of the things that he did for me in that class, I modeled everything I do about myself after him. The way I dress, everything like that. Obviously, things have changed over time, but for the longest time, I would dress like him. I did my hair like him. I did everything because I just respected this guy so much. But I got into this seminary class, and once again, I felt like a nobody. I felt so unwelcomed, and I had no friends because like I said, I had a lot of kind of like bad friends in high school. There's popular, where you're at least in Utah, I don't know how it works everywhere else, but there's popular, then there's like everything in between, and there's like popular. Where this sounds so like prideful. I'm not trying to like get like that, where you're not necessarily it's kind of like a troublesome popular. Like you're kind of like I don't know how to say this in a way that won't sound like so cringy. So I'm just gonna let you kind of imagine. I'm just gonna leave it there. Whatever. Okay, I feel like this is coming off too cocky, and I'm not trying to get it that way, right? Whatever. Okay, but I'm sitting here in this class, and every day this guy named Joe would be like, "Gabe, like, how are you doing, man? Like, he'd like compliment things about me, like he'd compliment like a piece of clothing I was wearing, and it really stuck out to me. Just how kind he was, even though I think other people maybe, at least in this setting, might have, I don't know. I felt like I was viewed very poorly in that setting, even though that was definitely probably not the case. And every day he would do this. And I started, like I said, this is about when I started to style my hair kind of like him. And I remember I came to school one day and I was still trying to learn how to style my hair. This is like earlier in high school. And I actually came with like the weirdest pompadour ever in my entire life. It kind of looked like a lesbian pompadour, right? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, exactly. I show up to school looking like a clown. Okay, and I got made fun of so hard that day. You got friends and they'll just tease you and be like, "Bro, you look terrible." And I felt it, all right? And I walk up to this Joe guy and he like compliments my hair. He's like, "Bro, nice." But the thing was, it wasn't that he was trying to put me down. It was like he was being serious. He like was recognizing my efforts and complimenting me, and he was being honest. And I knew that because this was the kind of person he was. He was a very highly viewed individual. What nobody knows is that outside of that class, I was smoking and I was drinking and I was going to all these parties and I just did not feel good about myself. And he doesn't know how much I was struggling at that time and how difficult things were for me. I've got a great home life. I've got everything in my life is really good and was really good at that time. But I did not feel good about anything. I really felt like I was the bottom, even though I wouldn't have presented myself that way. I just felt like I was stuck in my life. But every day, consistently, Joe would just reach out and say these things, not knowing how I felt, not knowing any of these things. And you know what? I will remember Joe forever, not because he was like some popular guy, but because he was so kind and loving and so honest and personable, and he just cared so much about me, even though he didn't really know me. And I just want to close by saying that if you want to be known for anything in life, it's not about you, okay? It's about how you help others, how you impact others. It's not about how you show yourself and present yourself online. It's about how other people see you. Because I can honestly say I will forever remember this Joe guy because of how he treated me. And I honestly want to say and invite you guys, like, just find those people, find the heavy heads. Find those that don't feel welcome. If you don't feel welcome yourself, then that's a good sign that it is time. It's time to look around. Because many feel just like you. And if you're not humble enough to reach out, then your life can't begin. People will never see you for the value that you are worth. I love you guys. I really do appreciate you guys watching this video. Hopefully you guys stayed long enough. I don't know if I was able to share enough to help you feel better or to help you find some purpose or a path in your life. But if I did, please leave a like, comment if you have any questions, or if you just want to reach out. I'd love to talk, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future content. I want to be creating a lot more content like this, and it just helps to see that, that what I'm doing is working. But I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.